Welcome back to the School of Big History. We are multicelled creatures, and unlike the chain-like connections and colonies of some prokaryotes, which are all composed of the same exact cell type, we're composed of cells of different types. While the entirety of our organism has one major collection of the same genetic material in all of our cells, the active parts of our genome differ cell to cell. This is what specialization looks like, as an organism has different parts with different functions and natures. This feature of specialization is arguably what it takes to be a proper, complex, multicelled creature. As we've seen, the first life doesn't fit this model. In fact, assuming life started about 4 billion years ago, it took almost 3 billion years before a differentiated multicelled creature came to be. That creature is a red algae. And thanks to the fact that beyond multicellularity, it's also the earliest known sexually reproducing organism, it was given the name Bangiomorpha pubescens. I can't confirm that the bang of Bangiomorpha is referring to sex, but at least one source posits that. Pubescens is definitely referring to sex though, and it's also referring to the fact that Bangiomorpha's filamental structure looks like a hair, so the pubic reference has two meanings. Either way, this 1 billion year old organism shows that multicellularity, and sex, but sex is presumed to have likely come about earlier, evolved well before the ample evidence we have of fauna from the Cambrian explosion. The Cambrian explosion brings to us the most familiar images of early life. And the Cambrian period, which marks the beginning of the explosion, also marks the beginning of the fourth and final eon of Earth's current history, the Phanerozoic eon, or the eon of abundant life. But visible to the naked eye forms of life are not the beginning, and multicelled life has an origin far earlier than the Cambrian. This fills out, at least in part, the gap from Darwin's time of life before the Cambrian. As Darwin said, "Consequently, if my theory be true, it is indisputable that before the lowest Silurian stratum was deposited, long periods elapsed, as long as, and probably far longer than, the whole interval from the Silurian age to the present day, and that during these vast yet quite unknown periods of time, the world swarmed with living creatures." Indeed, it did. And not just life, multicelled life. Multicelled life has an origin far earlier than the Cambrian. Beyond Bangiomorpha specifically, which is the only evidence we have of multicellularity prior to 800 million years ago, so besides for that, the evidence from fossils, biomarkers, and genomic dating indicate multicelled life being around between 800 and 700 million years ago. And the period prior to the Cambrian, the Ediacaran period, now brings us many forms of life, much of which is unplaceable in modern life types, though obviously some of the creatures of this era are the precursors to the explosion we see in the Cambrian. With multicellularity, the possibility of growth and increasing complexity were opened wide, and in the Cambrian, that possibility began to flower. It's in this time period, sometime between 541 and 518 million years ago, that the first vertebrate arose. Vertebrates take us one step closer to us, so we may well take a look at that next.